Welcome to Dark Truths, Religion Uncovered. In this sacred space, we examine ancient theological teachings through the lens of modern expectations. Tonight, we confront a belief so normalized within our spiritual practices that it rarely feels arrogant. The idea that God actually owes us something. In contemporary religion, entitlement often hides behind spiritual language. We go through our prayers and expressions of faith, expecting answers, blessings, protection, and peace, as if believing in God somehow puts him under an obligation to fulfill our every desire. We talk confidently about claimed promises and guaranteed favor, assuming our faith activates a kind of divine entitlement. This belief completely distorts the nature of our relationship with the Almighty God. But if we look at ancient theology, we find a totally different posture, one that would make our modern assumptions seem baffling. In the sacred texts, no one approaches God with their hands out, expecting a pile of blessings. Instead, they come with hope, a humble yearning for connection. Look at Abraham, for instance. He doesn't stand before God demanding his promised descendants. He walks in trust, even without proof. Moses, seeing the burning bush, doesn't assume he's special. He trembles with reverence and awe. How about Job, enduring unimaginable pain? Doesn't believe God owes him justice? But with a deep conviction that God's ways are beyond human obligation. The ancient psalmists don't cry out because they think God has to respond. They cry out hoping that he might choose to. In ancient belief, entitlement as we know it just simply does not exist, because reverence fills that space. God isn't bound by a contract to justify his actions to you or me. Yet in our modern belief systems, we often treat God like a moral business partner. This leads to questions that reveal our sense of entitlement. I prayed, and why didn't he answer me? I believed, so why did this horrible thing happen? I lived a good life, then why did God let me suffer? These questions don't come from a search for knowledge. They come from a crippling assumption that God is obligated to reward our faith, stop our pain, and make our lives fair. The scriptures repeatedly challenge this flawed logic. The book of Ecclesiastes delivers a harsh truth. The righteous suffer, while the wicked often prosper. Jesus reminds us that the rain, a symbol for life's good and bad fortunes, falls on everyone, the good and the bad alike. And the ultimate rejection of entitlement theology is the cross. A story that shows how perfect obedience does not guarantee us safety or rescue. Ancient believers understood that God's ways don't have to match our definitions of fairness. This is a huge distinction that reveals the fragility of many modern faiths. Entitlement shatters under the weight of suffering, but true reverence stays strong throughout trials. The ancients approached God with a healthy fear, not a crippling terror. Recognizing his vast and unknowable nature, this fear created a humility that reminded them they weren't the center of the universe. But in our modern faith journeys, this vital humility is often lost. Instead, God is seen as a supporter, an advocate. Faith becomes a tool for leverage, where demands take the place of reverence. And when God doesn't do what we expect, our belief can crumble into resentment. Ancient theology knew how dangerous this mindset was. In the story of Job, God doesn't give simple explanations for his suffering. Instead, he hits Job with a haunting challenge. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? God doesn't explain himself. He questions the very foundation of Job's expectation for an answer. Job's response wasn't satisfaction. It was surrender. This ancient understanding often clashes with modern sensibilities. We might see God's silence about suffering as harsh or unkind, but in the context of ancient faith, it's an honest reflection of divinity. A God who owes you nothing can't be manipulated. He engages with us out of love that is beyond obligation. A love that can be unsettling, even scary, because we can't control it. In our modern practices, we often pick reassurance over reverence, thinking it's the kinder path. But the comfort of reassurance often just feeds entitlement, while true reverence builds humility. And humility is the fertile ground where faith can thrive, especially in hard times. When we expect God to perform on demand, the disappointment is always guaranteed. But when we let God be God, the mysteries of life become manageable and even tolerable. Ancient faith approached the divine empty-handed and full of hope. Modern belief, too, often comes with a checklist of expectations. This one difference changes everything about how we see prayer, worship, obedience, and doubt. Entitled faith screams in frustration, "Why didn't God do what I wanted?" Reverent faith asks a deeper, more personal question. Who am I becoming through this? As we reflect on this difficult but liberating truth, let's accept that God does not owe us answers, protection, comfort, or success. He owes us nothing. And in that, we find the beauty of a faith that can be genuine, not transactional. A God who owes nothing can never be controlled, and so he becomes the ultimate figure worthy of our reverence and adoration. So we end tonight with a challenging question. One ancient theology would ask modern believers without apology, if God owes you nothing, what's left of your faith when all your expectations are stripped away? Thank you for joining us on Dark Truths, Religion Uncovered. We invite you to share your thoughts below. Does faith require a sense of entitlement? Or does it call us to have the courage to stand before a God who owes us nothing at all?